Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of GameSack. I'm Dave.
And I'm Joe. And recently we talked about the 3DS system, and a lot of you have sent me private emails and packages over the mail saying that how you thought this was the first system with 3D games, but it's not. In fact, Nintendo had a 3D game system earlier called Virtual Boy, or what was that one?
Yeah, Virtual Boy. Yeah.
And, there's been lots of 3D games out. You know, the PlayStation 3 has 3D games, even the Xbox 3D, what was it called, 360?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yes, a couple 3D games. But this episode, we're going to take a look at some other 3D games, some ancient 3D games for the Sega Master System and the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay, on the Nintendo Entertainment System, there are two games released in 3D. First was Rad Racer, and then 3D World Runner. To view these games in 3D, you need to use the red and blue anaglyph glasses. Joe?
And we'll be taking a look at some Sega Master System 3D games as well, which require the LCD shutter goggles to view them in 3D. And we're going to take a look at some games like Blade Eagle 3D and perhaps Missile Defense 3D, one of my favorites. Outrun 3D, very common game to find at thrift stores. Zaxxon 3D. What's this? Oh, Maze Hunter 3D, and maybe even some Space Harrier 3D and some Line of Fire. So let's take a look at these games.
And here are the 3D offerings for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo's 3D offering is sadly small. Maybe the reason it's so small is because it actually doesn't work well. Using anaglyph 3D glasses not only screws up the cones and rods in your eyes, it makes everything that's supposed to be 3D a nice shade of purple. Looking at Rad Racer, I cannot sense any 3D and only see purple palm trees, purple clouds, and purple street lines. When I play 3D World Runner, all I see are purple clouds, stars, and other objects that are supposed to be in 3D. Sadly, I must concede that Sega is the winner in the 3D games department for 8-bit systems.
And I agree with Dave on most of those points. But I can actually see the depth in NES 3D games, unlike him, since my eyes are superior to his. However, everything goes into the screen, and not once does anything ever come out in front of the screen. The anaglyph glasses also become annoying very quickly, as I prefer to view my games in color, which you can do by pressing the select button to go back and forth between 2D and 3D.
Okay, that was the offering on the NES. Let's go to Joe for Sega's offerings.
Whoa! Slow down, Dave. Just slow down, okay? It's time to give away a free Neo Geo game for one of our lucky viewers. And the Neo Geo game that we're giving away for free this time is, let's see, randomly, is Viewpoint, which has 74 megs, and this is going to Matt Turner. So enjoy your copy of Viewpoint, Matt Turner. We'll send this out soon.
You'll love it.
Yeah, keep that. And now back to 3D madness. Let's look at some Sega 3D games.
And you can add to the excitement with sports pads, control sticks, and the first video games ever in 3D.
Sega's the one.
That commercial's cool, but that part is not entirely accurate.
Sega's the one.
Okay, now that part is accurate. It's 100% true.
Sega's the one.
But this part isn't.
And the first video games ever in 3D.
Sega wasn't actually the very first video game system with 3D. That award goes to the Vectrex 3D Imager back in early 1984. That actually had a spinning disc inside the goggles. But enough about that. Now let's look at the Sega 3D games.
Sega's 3D offerings are much better. Not only does the 3D actually work and feel like the action is coming out of the screen, but Sega actually supported the 3D efforts and put out a nice amount of software. Let's look at the games. Blade Eagle was the weakest in terms of 3D effects. A ton of ghosting which made my eyes work overtime trying to adjust, and they never were able to. By the time I was done playing this, my eyes were hurting so bad I felt like I just saw my mom naked.
Blade Eagle did have some decent music though. Another game with good music is Space Harrier 3D. This is actually a pretty good game, although it is much more difficult than the original Space Harrier on the Master System, and it moves more slowly as well. The 3D effect is pretty good, but sometimes it seems like simple, flat layers of depth.
Outrun 3D was fairly enjoyable in 3D. The tunnels were amazing, and I could even smell the urine from the transients that spent the night there last night.
Yeah, sorry about that, but when you gotta go, you gotta go. Now let's look at Zaxxon 3D, where you shoot things down and eventually get to a really cool scaling tunnel where you shoot down more things. This thing really sticks out of the screen and frightens me with its heightened sense of mega realism.
Maze Hunter 3D had a real nice 3D effect, a real sense of depth. By far the best looking 3D game, but not necessarily the most fun.
And here we have Line of Fire, which was not released in the US, but it has a hidden 3D mode which you access by holding down both buttons on the controller when you turn the power on. The 3D effect is okay, but it's not one of the better efforts. This game was evidently popular enough to be made into a 2D movie starring Clint Eastwood, however.
Missile Defense 3D was quite fun to play and had some good deep 3D effects also. A lot of phallic symbols in this game, if you take a closer look.
Yeah, really. In this scene, the missiles fly over a continent we like to call Dicklandia. I mean, just look at it. But still, this is a really fun game which also makes use of the Sega Light Phaser. All in all, the Sega Scope 3D glasses work much better as you would expect. The NES games really don't offer much in the way of 3D realism or excitement. But the Sega glasses are so incredibly real that you'll be dodging left and right and up and down, and things will seem to fly right at you from the screen. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of GameSack, where we looked at many 3D games.
And we'll be back next week to get our hands way deep into that game stack and see what we can find. Thanks for coming. Have you seen my pills?